Welcome to episode 29 of Kratom Sobriety. I'm Jacob, and I'm here with Decima. Decima, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Jacob. How are you doing?
I'm doing good as well. Thanks for asking.
Good.
So today on the episode, we've got an interview with Chad. Chad found himself addicted to the feel-free shots, as well as using some OPMS shots and regular Kratom. He had a relapse in the middle there and some experience with medicated assisted treatment too. So it's a good conversation, and I think one that our audience will enjoy. But before we get to that, Decima and I were going to talk a little bit about medicated assisted treatment and about opiate replacement therapy and Suboxone, as well as blockers like things like Vivitrol, sorry. So Decima, why don't you go ahead and kick us off? You've been using Vivitrol, I think, for a few months now?
I have, yes. Tomorrow, I actually get my 5th Vivitrol shot. I do have a little bit of experience with other forms of MAT, Suboxone and methadone as well. I've tried those in the past. My big thing is there's just so many different paths to recovery, and all of these medications do not work the same. What works for you might not work for me, or, we all have to find our own path to recovery. That being said, I have found that Vivitrol is what has actually been the best option for me. Reason why is because Vivitrol, it doesn't cause any sort of physical dependency. It doesn't alter your mood in any way. You don't feel the Vivitrol, if that makes sense, in the way that you would feel like Suboxone or methadone. If I didn't get my shot tomorrow, I wouldn't get sick or anything. I would just go on about my life. Those are things that I really love about Vivitrol. My favorite thing about Vivitrol, all else, is that it does what it's supposed to do. It blocks the cravings. I never, ever think about Kratom. And to me, that was the missing piece of the puzzle. That was that piece that I just couldn't get whenever I was relapsing over and over again. So I know that you have a little experience with relapse yourself. So I would I would love to hear what led you to Matt as well, Jacob.
Yeah, thanks for asking, and that's great that Vivitrol's been so good for you with blocking Kratom. That's awesome. Relapse is what led me to ultimately consider getting on MAT and ultimately using Suboxone. Essentially, I had tried to quit Kratom extract the first time like 2 years before I decided to ultimately get on MAT, and I probably went through cold turkey withdrawal. I could never taper. I tried that multiple times. It just never worked. So I'd go through the cold turkey withdrawal, and then the physical acutes would stop after like 5 or 7 days. And then the mental stuff would just keep lingering on. And that's what ultimately always kind of led me to relapse. So the last time was in the spring, and I was at work. It had been like 18 or 19 days since I had last taken any Kratom. And I remember being in the office, and we have this like wellness room, and I went and laid down because I couldn't just do anything. And I was like, if I don't go get some Kratom extract now, I think I'm just going to jump out the window or something here because I just can't keep doing this. So that was my last relapse. And then a few weeks later, I went and talked to my doctor, who referred me ultimately to a different doctor to get medicated assisted treatment. And it's been working well for me. I also don't really have any cravings or anything like that. I have a long history of substance abuse. So like I had some opiate problems back a long time ago, and had a lengthy alcohol problem that I've been almost alcohol free for almost 5 years now. And it's interesting because I find that like I don't really have any cravings for drinking either. And I didn't really a lot when I was on Kratom, but towards the end I did. So there's a little bit of a difference there. One thing that you mentioned about that I like about Vivitrol and I plan on ultimately stopping the Suboxone. I want to get like a year of continuous sobriety and then either taper, or I'm thinking about switching to the Sublocade shot because I heard it's a pretty good way to kind of get a few injections, and then it kind of naturally tapers you off. But that's kind of my plan there. But I obviously am physically dependent on the medication, and that's my one big kind of worry is I'm ultimately going to have to deal with that. And I think that's like you mentioned, that's I think one of the big benefits from Vivitrol or naltrexone and stuff like that.
Right. I would agree with that simply because a lot of us, that's why we started doing Kratom, was to get off of other opioids and opiates. So we're constantly looking for something to help us, ultimately we want to be free. I feel like that's what we all want. I'll just be honest. My experience with methadone and Suboxone is the physical dependency was very strong. The withdrawals were very strong. It's nothing you're not going to be able to get through, though. If you, are doing it under medical supervision, like it sounds like you are, and you taper down the way that you're supposed to, I do believe a lot of that can be alleviated. Also, not going up too high. I think a lot of these medications, again, I have to say this, I always say this, I'm not a doctor or medical professional or anything like that, but my personal opinion is that it's slightly over medicated, and the doses are really higher than a lot of people actually need. If you can keep your dose lower, I felt like that was easier for me. I also used Suboxone once on a very short-term basis, just 3 days, and it was less than 2 milligrams, over the course of those 3 days. I literally used, it was the tiniest little corner.
Yeah.
It was less than a milligram on the first day. Then the next day I did the same thing. And then the third day I did half of that. Then after that, I did still have some withdrawal, but it wasn't, anything that we can't get through. I think that you'll find success as long as you continue to follow the advice of your doctors and do it the way that you're supposed to do it,
Yeah.
So I totally get why. I do want to talk a little bit about the differences between these medications. We had already touched on how the Suboxone and methadone are physically, you do become physically dependent on those in a way that you don't with Vivitrol. I'm wondering if there's any kind of like side effects that you have.
When I started the Suboxone, my doctor originally prescribed me 12 milligrams a day, and like the second day, like I know what over-medicated feels like, and that's what I felt like. I was like, I just wanted to sleep all day. So like 2 or 3 days in, I talked to my physician, and I was like, this seems like too much. Can we take this down? So she was like, yeah, let's go down to 8 milligrams. And then I was like, this still feels like too much. So ultimately, over like a week and a half period, from when I started to where I ultimately ended up, I tapered down to 4 milligrams, and that took away a lot of the side effects. But the side effects at that higher doses were like very, very much lethargy and very sleepy. I will say the first day I did feel like high. It wasn't like a fun, like euphoric high, but it had like the parts of an opiate high that kind of aren't fun, like the itchiness and the like just, not really nodding, but just kind of out of it. So that was a side effect there. On 4 milligrams, I don't have a lot of side effects. The one thing that I do have that is sometimes bothering is like urinary retention, which is annoying, but it's nothing like super, super major. And I will say that like the longer time has gone on, the less my body's just kind of gotten used to the medication and the less side effects I have. I think one other interesting difference between even Suboxone and methadone that I've never tried methadone, but my understanding is methadone's like a full opiate antagonist, so you can actually kind of ratchet the dosage up, where you can do the same thing with Suboxone, but because it's a partial opiate antagonist, you're not really going to get any benefits if you keep increasing the dosage. So
that makes a lot of sense. I remember some of the side effects that I had. I would say, being tired a lot was one of them. And usually, like you said, a sign of being, your dose being too high. I did crave sugar a lot. And I seem to remember a lot of people did that were at the clinic. So I gained some weight, and there was a little bit of loss of libido, but I think that comes with, opioids and opiates of all kinds. Now the Vivitrol, as far as side effects go, there's also, I do want to mention that Vivitrol is the monthly injection of the medication naltrexone, which can also be taken daily and in a pill form, which also works really well for me. I want to say that between those, there were fewer side effects with the pill for me. In the beginning, it did make me a little tired, loss of appetite, which, some of us don't mind that. Going a few days without something to eat is good for your body sometimes. After having the shot 5 times now, tomorrow will be the 5th one, I have realized that I do have a very, I don't know if it's a common side effect, but it is a side effect that can happen to some people. It's bad. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
A few days after the shot, every single time, I have had 24 hours of pure hell. I'm talking, if you can imagine a stomach virus on top of food poisoning, on top of withdrawal, 24 hours straight, cold sweats. And at first I didn't know that I was trying to figure out what was causing this. Was it the shot? Am I just getting sick every month? But for this to happen every single month, and my doctor did say that it is something that can happen to some people. And it is so bad. It's so bad that I almost want to go to the hospital. It's that bad.
Oh, wow.
I've never heard of anybody else having the side effect. So hopefully anybody else out there that, I don't want this to keep you from trying it, because I don't think this is a common side effect, and it's almost worth it one day. Almost. So for me, I'm about to make the switch to the pill form, next month. So
Okay.
yeah, that is. And then also the loss of appetite can kind of stick around for some people. But for me, it's kind of all the other side effects have just mellowed out. Like you said, your body just gets used to the medication, I think, after a while.
Yeah, the libido thing's interesting because I had a huge loss of libido on Kratom, and it's actually better on Suboxone, so maybe that's why. And the sugar thing, when I quit drinking alcohol 5 years ago, I totally replaced it with sugar, so I can't comment on that because I already had that problem.
Yeah, got you there. You already mentioned that you plan to give the medication a good year, which is a great plan, I think, because that's the same plan I have. To give the Vivitrol a year until I feel comfortable on my own with it. So what do you think that year looks like for you? How do you plan on making that happen?
Yeah, good question. For me, that year looks like full embracing and like really just focusing on recovery. So I've gone back and restarted going to smart recovery meetings. Obviously helping with this podcast to do some service work. I also moderate some groups. So really it's just throwing myself into that and building healthy habits. Like I've always exercised and stuff, but I did, not focus on it as fully as I could have when I was on Kratom all the time. So it's really just that I want to build healthy habits to replace that with, and then, move on and continue those healthy habits once that year is up and I'm, hopefully fully substance free.
That's pretty much, that's dead on what I'm doing. I'm also trying to be more accountable to like professionals, like medical professionals, and seeking therapy, which is something I never did before. Trying to dig deeper. Yeah. So it sounds like a great plan. In what ways is your life better? I know for me, it's a million.
Oof. Yeah, it's a million too. The first thing is, I was having some just I wouldn't even call them side effects. I would say medical problems from Kratom usage. Things like numbness, shaking from the neurological side effects, stomach problems, dry skin. So all that's cleaned up, which is great. I unfortunately was on extracts mostly, which are expensive. So a huge financial hit there that I'm slowly rebuilding myself from. I could never stomach the amount of powder I would have had to take to sustain a habit at the end there. So all of that is so much better now. And like you, I think the, being more accountable to professionals and stuff like that. Like I also have a therapist, and I did do that during Kratom, but I blew off a lot of appointments and wasn't the best patient, that's for sure. So I'm trying to be more focused on that. But everything's it's like night and day from active Kratom addiction, where I was constantly chasing that high and trying to get a feeling that I could never get back.
Yep, right. Feeling like you couldn't do anything without it. I also want to mention that I became more accountable to family members too. I just thought about that. Like my partner, I used to hide my use from him. And when I finally became honest and accountable, it made all the difference. So,
Same. I did the same thing.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy how we just try to hide it and do it on our own? And I tried a zillion times to do it on my own and I just couldn't. So this is definitely different this time. It sounds like it is for you as well, which is, so good to hear. I will say this, life is not perfect now, but I can deal with the shit so much better, much easier when things happen, big things, bad things that life, throws at us. The other day, I was just sitting there kind of depressed because I recently lost my job and I'm just like,
sorry to hear that.
Thank you. It's going to be okay. But, I'm just like sitting there feeling depressed about it. And I'm like, feeling depressed and I'm like, you know what? This feels good to feel depressed because I'm supposed to feel depressed. In the past, I would have tried to numb that depression and feel something I'm not naturally supposed to feel, so it's a whole different, I'm a grown up now. I deal with feelings like a grown up should, I guess I'm trying to say.
I did a lot of the similar things where like I was always trying to numb all my feelings out. And, if you're in recovery and listening to this and you're like, every day is great, 100%, like you might be on a pink cloud. You're going to have good and bad days. That's life,
Yeah, and ride that pink cloud. I'm not going to say don't enjoy it because it is a lot of fun. Well, I'm so glad. Of course. Yeah, just don't be surprised when life becomes life again. You're going to be really impressed with yourself when you see how well you can handle it. It's going to be so different. I'm so glad that we were able to have this discussion today, Jacob. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with Matt, and it was really great to talk to you.
Yeah, really great to talk to you too. Thanks for sharing your experience, and on to the interview with Chad.
Yay.
This week on the podcast, we have Chad. Chad found himself using the feel free shots and has a whole story to those. But I'll let Chad go ahead and tell us that. So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a lot of things. I am a health and safety professional, so I get to travel all over California, Nevada, Arizona, and go to all these crazy industrial places that make all the things that we need and try to talk them out of not killing people. I'm a musician. I'm a stepdad, dog dad, and all that rolled up.
Yeah, you got a lot going on there. That's cool though. Health and safety inspector. I've never, I don't think I've ever. I definitely haven't interviewed anybody that has that
18
profession.
years in.
18 years in. Awesome. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the last time you had the feel free shots?
So there was a lot more than the feel free at various times, but I don't actually know my sobriety date. We're about a month in. I learned that when I was trying to do a rapid taper, as somebody that had already been dealing with sleep issues and sleepwalk and things, conscious or otherwise, when I was doing a taper, I could get up and take a feel free shot and not know.
All right.
So I don't know the actual day, but we're about a month in. Why
don't you tell us a little bit about how you first came into contact with Kratom or with Feel Free, and how did that story start?
I had no addiction issues before. Got prescribed oxycodone for like mouth surgery, like eye surgery, like didn't finish it, didn't have the itch to ever do that stuff again. Never smoked weed in my life, would drink a bit in the past, but when I started dating my wife, soon to be ex-wife, back in 2016 or 17, right? She has a terrible bulging disc in her neck. So she's been on Norco for a decade and wanted to get off. And at the same time, listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, and I don't remember which Bell brother it was, but they're on there talking about the efficacy of Kratom, and it's this magic thing that will fix everything in your life. I started to read about it for her, and she started to take it. It helped. and her pain management specialist, because they drug test you for that, to make sure that you're actually taking the stuff that you're buying and not selling it. And they said, what is this other thing that's in your system? So she had to stop immediately. And whatever it was, the hair on the back of my neck stood up just looking at the bottle of powder capsules sitting there, and just, I feel a little crappy today. Let's just see what this does. And then fully down the rabbit hole. So I went from, a capsule a day to taking fistfuls of them, stopped for a while once I realized that, oh, this is actually it's hitting the opioid receptors. I'm going into withdrawal at various times. And then started again and built up quite the tolerance, and eventually found my way to the OPMS Gold and eventually the black shots, and then the feel freeze, and was at one point probably taking enough to kill a rhino.
We've had a couple guests on the podcast that haven't had any prior substance abuse struggles. I actually talked to one not too long ago that their first kind of foray into addiction was Kratom, so that's not super uncommon. So how long did that progression take? Like you started, it sounded around like 2016, 2017-ish?
Yeah, and there were a couple quitting phases in there of just like, done, I'll deal with the 3-4 days of feeling like crap, but it really got bad. Last year was definitely the worst year. And then had a come to Jesus moment with my wife in January, and she's, hey, you need to get out of the house, because this, all the lying and negotiating and hiding and the spending money, I did not marry a dumb woman. So it's, we think we can be real sneaky and smart and all the things, and we're not.
Yeah, I've totally been there. Where did you kind of, I guess, end up? Was it mostly on the feel free shots, or was it like all of them together, etc.?
I was so at the height, I was waking up from withdrawal at 3:30 in the morning. So I'm driving to 7-Eleven. I'm buying 2 feel frees just to fall back asleep. And then I'm taking at 6 a.m. I'm taking a OPMS Gold capsule, and then I'm taking at 10 an OPMS black shot, and then sprinkle in some feel frees for the rest of the day, and alcohol mixed in there at the end of the day to just stave off the withdrawal for as long as possible.
Wow. So you mentioned the the strife with your spouse. Was that what ultimately led you to make the decision to quit? And you said that was in or the early part of this year.
Yeah, it's in it. I made some mistakes, and I know this has definitely come up on the podcast, but I'm stubborn and don't like going to the doctor. So I figured out I'm gonna figure out the easiest way to make this the least painful process possible. So January 16th is when I was done earlier this year. And like I said, I'm a month clean now. So I found a telehealth doctor, and she recommended Suboxone, and I didn't do the research that I should have. And she recommended doing tabs for a minimum of 3 months. And that didn't sound right, knowing what the withdrawal would be, but did it. All right, I'm talking to a doctor. Trust her. And 2 months in, talking to a friend that did heroin for a very long time, and he was on Suboxone for 5 years and had a hard time getting off, and just immediately recognized that, this is going to be a problem. And the doctor was not on board with me stopping. So I took matters into my own hands and did a rapid taper. And that was far worse than getting off Kratom or alcohol or anything.
Yeah, I bet. When you're going to taper Suboxone, you got to do it very, very slow and very, very low, with hopefully the help of a doctor the whole way. So that had to be very painful.
Yeah.
did that lead you back into using Kratom, or how
It
did you get through it?
Yeah, I got through it. There were some,
Wow,
a couple
that's
nights there for 2 weeks that I could have or would have killed myself if I had the ability to do it, and didn't, just out of obligation to family, friends. It doesn't matter. It didn't happen. Made it through weirdly. So that was like March, April. I didn't touch Kratom again till June.
Oh wow, that had to be kind of psychologically scarring and all that stuff. I appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to talk to us. I know it's probably not easy to to relive some of those moments. I know it isn't for me sometimes.
Yeah, I was also diagnosed with autism this year, so it's there.
Okay,
Whatever filter that I had before is gone, knowing what I know about my brain.
you should be you should be yourself.
Yeah,
You shouldn't worry about that stuff. How did the kind of the first month go that first time when you were off the Suboxone and off the Kratom? How did you feel, and how were you doing at that point?
I turned back into myself again.
Mm-hmm.
Just chemicals in the brain, skin health issues, like everybody that does the feel free. It got to the point where my skin was literally cracking open to the point of bleeding. I lost so much weight and did again. My body and brain and spirit and everything were so happy being off of that stuff and eating again and doing the things that make me happy that it was easy there for a while, which is why it became an issue later, because we learned the hard way, and I got cocky about I don't have a problem. It's fine. And
Yeah.
now I definitely know that it's not fine.
Yeah, when I got sober off of alcohol for the first time, I listened to this podcast called Recovery Elevator, and the host talks a lot about the three worst words an addict can say are "I got this," which is basically the same thing you're saying. It's like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need to worry about that. That's in the past. I can go do whatever I want now. And it's like, oh no, you gotta stay vigilant, because unfortunately this shit sneaks in back in insidious ways.
Yeah, our whatever that demon is it's good at creeping its way back in.
So, and relapse is very, very much, I would say, probably the more common route with addiction. I know for me it has been. I've had a very bumpy, lengthy polysubstance addiction myself, so I know all about that. And it can be super discouraging, but it's unfortunately there's some of those people that are like, I quit doing whatever my drug of choice was, and I just left it there, and I've been sober for 20 years. And you're like, they're all like, they look like Superman or Superwoman, and that's not the story for most of us, unfortunately. So once you had relapsed and you were back in the thick of it, how did that progress? And did you use all the way up until you got clean here in August, or have you been kind of? Or I'm sorry, I guess it would, or about a month ago. Sorry, and
Yeah.
did you how'd that progression work
I went
this time?
fully down the rabbit hole, purely just feel freeze. There were days where I was taking 12 of them over the course of a day, and when I'm at my heaviest, I'm 130 pounds. So whatever the math is there for whatever I'm putting in my body, and when I went to the doctor last month, I was 113 pounds.
When you got off about a month ago, what was the thing that triggered it? How did it go? How did the withdrawals go? How was did the doctor give you anything to help?
I went to my doctor, told him I said, I'm going to die if we don't figure this out. And he understood, talked through it, and the withdrawal was literally nothing, because I don't know if you're familiar with tramadol, but I'm going to give you a week's worth of tramadol, and I didn't even need that. 3-4 days of it, I felt nothing that was more than being sore from doing a lot of physical things. The anxiety was for sure a thing, but I'm already anxious, so that's not a big deal. So taking some GABA exercising, getting out in the sun. If I need to sleep on the floor with the dogs to make myself feel better, I'll sleep on the floor with the dogs, and spending time with Jackson. And there's enough going on to fill my anxious brain for that to not be an issue.
That's good that it wasn't nearly as bad as it sounds like it was the first time you got through it. All right, let's talk a bit about the feel free. And was there something especially hard about that product, or that is a barrier to quitting it, or that's a bit like more than, let's say, the OPMS or just the regular Kratom?
Yeah, well, it's hard, and I know you guys have talked about this. There's something special in those things that hit every part of the lizard brain. Like whatever they're doing, whether it's fermenting the Kratom or the fennel something that people think is in there, whatever it is, it hits so fast and it's so short. So there's just that constant need to take another sip or a whole shot or whatever it is. Everything in my body just needed that all the time. I could take one, and it's, as much a dumpster fire of my physical health was last year, I've never been more effective at work. So
yeah,
whatever it is.
It's really interesting that you say that, because I felt the same way. Like I was working a really, really high stress job during like the midpoint of like the pandemic, I would say, like late 2020, early 2021, and like I got promoted, I like all this stuff, and I had a huge OPMS black Kratom habit at the time, like massive, like 4 or 5 of those a day, and plus more Kratom on top. It was crazy, but I was doing great at work. Looking back, I probably would have done better if I wasn't on it, but I still was able to perform at that level, which is something that with other substances I could never do.
The lies we're telling ourselves as good things are happening, that like, oh, it's helping, right?
You really can twist yourself up with any substance, but I think what's so vicious about and insidious about Kratom is that it's like you said, it's you don't black out, you're not gonna like nod out like you're on a strong opiate or something, but like it does all those, it satisfies that itch in the back of your mind and fills up those receptors all the same, and it is harder, in my opinion, to even, or at least it was for me, it was harder to quit than something like oxycodone, because it was just so easy to get. It didn't feel like it was wrong, and I could really, really convince myself that, yeah, it's fine. It's just, a supplement that I'm going to take to make my day better. Do you think that was that also like a barrier, one of the big barriers for you for quitting it?
The work or the accessibility?
Oh, both.
Yeah, it's in California. It is a struggle. If I need to get gas, and I do often because I drive maybe 40,000 miles a year for work, it's in every gas station without exception. So it's plastered on the door, and need to battle with that. Yeah, no, I'll be fine. I can have one like every day, all day. I miss taking it all the time, but as well, I'm not starting that over again.
Is there, what is the support mechanism that you have now? Is there anything you're doing to support your recovery?
NA is not super viable because they're learning about Kratom and what it is, and the whole harm reduction thing is whatever it is. So can't do that because they're taking it there and handing it out and whatever. So I shoved myself in a hole for a long time with my addiction and knew what I was doing, and I'm a bad liar. So I'm just not going to call my friends or family or the people that I care about, because I can't tell them that I'm okay, because I knew that I wasn't. So my support system now is listening to the podcast, doing this for accountability, and telling everybody who will listen that, hey, I love you. I'm a bad friend. I'm sorry, but I am also a drug addict and an alcoholic. So if I'm not talking to you or responding or whatever, come find me.
Everybody's different, so whatever works for you to keep you on this off the Kratom and make sure you're living the life you want to live is all good in my book. What's your life like today? Now that you've got a month out off of Kratom, how are you feeling
Yeah,
today? How are things looking?
physically, I'm getting there. I'm putting weight back on. We'll get there. Going through the divorce. She's still my best friend, but I put her through a lot. Like I said, I'm moving 3 miles away. It's still going to be in Jackson's life. One of the dogs is coming with me. Everything is going to be okay. There's light at the end of the tunnel.
There's no easy way to put it and say like you'll get through it. You will for sure, but it's just hard. It's hard. It's not going to be. You got to just do the work. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
so
yeah.
I have a question for you. At the end of the day, this was the biggest issue. Like without the lying, spending the money, all those things. Kratom for you kill your libido.
Yes.
Yeah.
It did. I went from probably like very very active in that department to I could be bothered maybe once a week. Maybe less sometimes.
And that's not fair to a partner, because with all the lying and the other things, we're giving them nothing at that point.
Yeah.
We're physically there and that's it.
And then when you get off, it kind of comes roaring back, which is like the worst time for it. Unfortunately. It's Kratom and really any opiate is gonna seem to do that from my experience, unfortunately. All right, so what is your when you're having a bad day or you just want to jam out and not think about anything? What music do you like to throw on?
I know it's gonna hurt his soul when he hears it, but I love the music that Charlie listens to as well. But I'm an old school death metal guy, so I listen to a lot of Cattle Decapitation, The Faceless, Necrophagist. Listening to that stuff helps get the crazy out, but I also like Bush from the 90s, At the Drive-In, the Mars Volta. I don't know if you're familiar with synthwave. It's basically like pop music from the 80s that people are making now with old equipment. I love all music.
I do too. I'm pretty. I wouldn't say pretty familiar. I'm decently familiar with synthwave. I've seen some artists, I think.
Yeah, Gunship is amazing.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with them, but I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, check them out. Listen to Tech Noir. That song broke my brain.
Tech Noir. Write that down. All right. So, what is the best advice you would give to someone that is getting ready to quit Kratom?
It's that you can definitely do this. Find a community. Reddit has a couple good ones that helped me out. For especially towards the end, specifically the feel free. Talk to people. Talk to your doctor. You're allowed to make mistakes, and it'll be okay. 2 steps forward, 1 step back is fine, but just keep going, and it gets so much better.
That's great advice. The mistakes part in particular, I loved. I think we're all allowed to make mistakes. I think for me, I'm going to just try to learn something from it and don't beat yourself up about it, because you can't go back and change anything. You can only, do things different as you move forward. So
yeah. The only other, it's not for everybody, but this is when I'm having a hard time or something new pops up. Just not to be a total Rogan bro, but I'm a big fan of Jocko's video Good on YouTube of just I'm excited to figure out how to fix it.
That's how I try to look at things nowadays too. What's the challenge ahead of me, and how do I get through it, and how do I take something away from it? Is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience, or any other topics you want to hit on before we conclude today?
I don't think so. This was good for me, and I hope for you and for the people that need to hear it, and we will all figure this out eventually.
It was definitely good for me. I always like the opportunity to talk to other people that have gone through similar struggles, and I think these stories are really helpful. We get a lot of good feedback, and the podcast is growing, and there's not a lot of stuff out there specifically for Kratom. So that's why I'm excited to be a part of it, and I'm really glad Charlie did it, and I'm really glad that you were willing to come on and be so vulnerable, and tell your story. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. It's what you guys are doing is important.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chad. Have a really nice weekend. I hope that your move goes well.
Yeah. Thank you, Jacob.
Hey folks, it's Charlie. No time this week to put together a formal Kratom in the headlines or a resource of the week. I want to thank Decima and Jacob for doing such a great job running the show this week. We did drop an interview on Wednesday with the journalist Edward Erickson Jr. of Courthouse News. If you've ever wondered how Kratom is sold as a food, when some of us experience it as a drug and the regulation behind that, it's a very informative guest appearance. I want to play a voicemail from a listener. Take a listen.
Hey, Charlie. My name is Franco. I've been listening to your podcast, and it's been helpful for me. I would love to go on and chat and share my experience. 27 years old. I've been battling with kratom addiction. I mean, the first time I used it was 2019, but it didn't really become an issue until about 2020, I'd say. Over those, 2-3 years, I've been attempting to quit over and over again. I'm a chronic relapser. I even went to a treatment center for it. That's how bad it was.
Franco, I know you're still out there struggling. Keep up the fight. We'd love to have you on when you're ready. And for anybody who's out there who is struggling, I want you to know that there are Kratom-specific online meetings on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights and Saturday mornings. Check out our social media accounts. Find out details about that, or email us and we can give you the login credentials of that for those. There's Reddit community groups that you can join, Facebook groups. You don't have to do this alone. There's several of the meetings have chat groups too, so contact us and we can get you in those group chats if you would find that to be supportive. And Chad, yes, my heart was not hurt at all with your music selections. I did know that there was a genre called death metal. I did not know that there was a genre called synth wave, but as a product of the 80s, that is probably more my style. I did listen to that song that was narrated by John Carpenter, Tech Noir. I don't think I've talked extensively about these, but as a teenager, I listened to a lot of New Order and the Smiths and the Talking Heads. And then in the 90s, I followed Jerry Garcia around. And in the last 2 or 3 decades, I've listened to mostly music on my local public radio station. So, if it's been on a Tiny Desk concert, I probably have heard them. This year, I went to a Willie Nelson, Bob Weir String Cheese Incident concert. And then my brother and I went to a Cure concert earlier in the summer. In terms of quitting Kratom, my anthem of late has been the song from Social Distortion called Ball and Chain. I wish I could play you out with it, but the record label has that song locked down. So I put together this Spotify playlist, Kick and K. Check it out in the show notes. And until next week, keep it Kratom free.